Marjorie's hand trembled for only a second before she ripped the gold ring from her finger. Then, with a look of cold disgust, she hurled it into Harold's chest. "You are nothing but a curse," she spat, her voice sharp enough to cut the silence. "Bankrupt, broken, dragging me down with your paralyzed son. I refuse to waste another day in this misery." Her words echoed through the small, crumbling house, striking Harold harder than any fist ever could. Simon, barely 10 years old, sat frozen in his wheelchair. His wide eyes filled with tears as he reached out a trembling hand toward his mother. "Mom, please." But Marjorie didn't even glance at him. The headlights of a sleek black car flared outside. Her new lover leaned casually against the door, smiling as if victory belonged to him. With a final, contemptuous glance, Marjorie grabbed her suitcase, slammed the door behind her, and walked away. Simon's cry broke into sobs, his small body shaking. Through the window, he watched his mother climb into the car, laughter spilling as the door closed. The car rolled away, taillights glowing like the last embers of a dying fire. Inside, silence crushed what was left. Harold fell to his knees, the ring clattering across the wooden floor. His world had collapsed in an instant. Wife gone, son shattered, future stolen. Viewers, let me ask you this. If the person you trusted most turned their back on you and your child at your darkest hour, what would you do? Could you ever forgive them? Before we begin this journey, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss any of the gripping, true-to-life stories we share each week. Harold once owned a modest construction firm, a company built with sweat, loyalty, and the trust of his workers. But all of it crumbled when a crooked supplier delivered faulty steel. The project collapsed, investors fled, and creditors circled like vultures. Within months, Whitlock Builders was nothing more than a name on foreclosure papers. The bank seized his office, the trucks, even the home where Simon once played in the yard. Debts piled higher than he could count, each letter stamped with red ink like a wound that refused to heal. And then came the accident. Simon, eager to help his father, had wandered too close to a half-finished site. One misstep, one fall, and his small body was never the same. The doctors said spinal damage, words that sounded like a life sentence. Harold carried his son from hospital to hospital, selling everything he owned just to keep the bills paid. The once proud man who built homes for others now had no roof secure over his own head. By the time Marjorie left, Harold was already hollowed out. But when that door slammed, something deeper broke. There was no partner, no safety net, only a father and his crippled child against the world. And in that silence, Harold realized one truth. If they were to survive, he would have to start again from nothing. Harold woke before dawn, his body aching from restless nights on the couch. The eviction notice still clung to the door, a silent reminder that even this tiny rental was slipping away. He looked at Simon, asleep in his wheelchair beside the bed, and whispered, "I'll find a way, son. I have to." That morning, Harold pulled on a faded work shirt and walked to the day labor corner downtown. Men twice his age and half his strength waited for trucks to stop, offering back-breaking work for a few crumpled bills. Harold clenched his fists. A man who once commanded crews now stood in line, begging for scraps of labor. The sun climbed higher, and just as despair threatened to swallow him, a black sedan rolled to the curb. A driver in a dark suit stepped out and scanned the line. "Mr. Whitlock?" he called, his voice firm. Harold stiffened. No one here knew his name. Before he could answer, another figure emerged from the car, a tall man with silver at his temples, dressed in a tailored suit that whispered of power. "Harold," the man said warmly, extending his hand. "It's been a long time. Do you remember me? I'm Thomas Aldridge. Years ago, you gave me my first contract when no one else would. You believed in me. Memories flickered. An eager young subcontractor Harold once took a chance on. Now that same man stood before him, a titan of industry. I owe you everything, Aldridge said. And today, I've come to return the favor. Harold hesitated when Aldridge's driver opened the car door. His boots were caked with dust, his shirt frayed at the collar. He felt like an intruder about to step into a world where he no longer belonged. But then Simon's hopeful eyes flashed in his mind, the boy whispering, "Dad, maybe this is the chance we prayed for." With a heavy breath, Harold climbed in. The following afternoon, he sat inside an office unlike anything he had ever known. Polished marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a mahogany desk that seemed to stretch endlessly. Across from him, Aldridge leaned forward, his voice steady but edged with fire. "Tell me everything," he said. And Harold did. He spoke of the crooked supplier, the lawsuits, the foreclosure, the debts that buried him alive. By the end, his voice cracked when he admitted losing not just his company, but the very home where Simon learned to walk. Aldridge's jaw tightened. No man should be stripped like this. Not when fraud is at the heart of it. He summoned a team of lawyers and accountants. Files spread across the desk. Documents pulled from hidden registries and shell corporations. Hours turned into days as the network of deceit unraveled. At last, Aldridge slammed a folder shut. "Harold, listen." The land, the office, the house, they were all funneled through dummy firms. And here's the twist. They now sit under a holding company I own. Harold's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Aldridge slid a stack of deeds across the table. "I'm saying they're yours again. Every inch. But there is one condition." Harold's eyes narrowed. "What condition?" "You don't rebuild Whitlock Builders just for yourself," Aldridge said. "You rebuild it to give men like you, men who lost everything, a second chance. That's how you honor what was stolen." For the first time in years, Harold felt the ground steady beneath his feet. Not just a return, but a calling. But while Harold and his son clawed their way back from ruin, far away, Marjorie was living a different kind of dream, one glittering on the surface but rotting underneath. Her marriage to Victor Lang was a spectacle of wealth, a ballroom dripping with roses, chandeliers sparkling above, champagne flowing until dawn. In her silk gown and diamonds, Marjorie told herself she had finally escaped misery. At first it seemed true. Days of shopping sprees on Fifth Avenue, nights of rooftop dinners and laughter. Victor paraded her like a trophy, introducing her proudly. "My wife, the jewel of my life." But soon the cracks appeared. Victor's grown children sneered openly, whispering loud enough for her to hear. She was nothing but a cashier. "Now she thinks she's royalty," another added with a smirk. "She's here for the money, and father's too blind to see it." Marjorie forced a smile, but humiliation burned in her chest. She drank more, laughed louder, desperate to drown the sting. Then came the betrayal she could not ignore. One evening, slipping into Victor's study, she found a silk scarf, perfumed, not hers, carelessly draped across his chair. Later, at a gala, Victor kissed her cheek for the cameras, only to vanish an hour later on the arm of a younger woman. When their eyes met across the room, Victor didn't flinch. He simply raised his glass, as if to remind her she was replaceable. That night, Marjorie lay awake, diamonds cutting into her skin, silk sheets colder than stone. The world had given her everything she thought she wanted. But beneath the glitter, her cage was closing in. While Marjorie's nights grew colder despite the glitter around her, somewhere else another story was reaching its reckoning. For Harold, The past was about to face judgment in the harsh light of a courtroom. Months later, a summons arrived in Harold's mailbox. The man who had sold him the faulty steel, the very spark that had burned his world to ashes, was finally facing trial. Inside the courthouse, the air was heavy with tension. Harold sat in the witness chair, palms pressed against the wood, his heart hammering. Across the room, the crooked supplier sat hunched, his once arrogant posture reduced to a hollow shell. The prosecutor laid out the evidence: fraudulent contracts, fake safety reports, hidden bank transfers. Each document struck like a hammer blow, exposing years of deceit. And then it was Harold's turn. He spoke steadily, his voice rough but unwavering. He told the court about the collapse of the project, the debts that devoured him, the house lost, the night his son's future was shattered. Every word carried the weight of scars carved deep into his life. The judge listened in silence, his expression darkening. When the gavel finally struck, the verdict rang clear: guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, negligence. The sentence was years behind bars. Harold did not smile. He only closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he had been holding for years. Justice had come, not triumphant, but cleansing, like a thorn finally pulled from his flesh. Justice had been served, but Harold's heart remained cautious. The courtroom had closed one chapter, yet the scars of betrayal lingered like shadows. In the evenings, Anna often stopped by after Simon's therapy sessions. She would bring soup, straighten the scattered papers on his desk, or simply sit with him in the quiet. Her presence was steady, warm, like a candle that refused to go out in a storm. Sometimes, Harold found himself watching her laugh with Simon, the boy's eyes lighting up in ways he hadn't seen for years. Other times, he pulled back, guilt gnawing at him. How could he open his heart again when the wound Marjorie left still ached? He told himself it wasn't fair. To Anna, to Simon, to the memory of promises once broken. One night, as Harold sat on the porch, staring into the darkness, Simon wheeled out beside him. "Dad," he said softly, "you don't have to be afraid. Mom hurt us, yes, but Anna isn't her." Harold turned, startled. Simon's young voice carried a wisdom far beyond his years. "Don't let old pain steal new happiness," Simon whispered. "You deserve to smile again. We both do." Harold swallowed hard, his throat tight. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future not defined by loss, but by love, waiting patiently at his doorstep. While Harold's world quietly opened to love again, miles away, Marjorie's golden kingdom was beginning to crumble under the weight of fate. The first crack appeared when Victor collapsed in his office. Doctors delivered the verdict in hushed tones. Stage 4. Aggressive. Time is short. Almost overnight, the glitter drained from her world. Champagne flutes were replaced by pill bottles, the yacht anchored lifeless at the dock. Marjorie now spent her days in hospital corridors, clutching her designer purse as machines beeped beside Victor's fragile body. Money poured out like water. Specialists, private clinics, experimental drugs, millions evaporated in months. Whispers spread. Victor's empire was shrinking, his accounts bleeding dry. At night, the man who once called her his jewel grew cruel. "You wanted this life," he snapped between coughs, eyes blazing with bitterness. "Now choke on it as it rots." When death finally came, it was quiet. Victor's last breath slipped away at dawn, leaving Marjorie in a room that smelled of disinfectant instead of roses. The funeral was staged in grandeur, roses and black limousines everywhere. Marjorie dressed in black silk and diamonds, expecting to be honored as the grieving widow. But when the last hymn faded, Victor's eldest son stepped forward, His words cut like steel. You were never one of us. The estate belongs to his blood. Not you, she protested, waving her marriage certificate. In response, they presented a prenuptial agreement, signed years ago, stripping her of everything. By sunset, the penthouse locks were changed, credit cards canceled, accounts frozen. Marjorie stood on the curb with a single suitcase, diamonds heavy on her throat, useless as glass. The golden cage was gone, and with it, every illusion she had traded her family for. While Marjorie stood on the curb with nothing but a suitcase, Harold's world was blooming with quiet joy. On a golden afternoon, the Whitlock home was alive with laughter. White chairs lined the backyard, wildflowers swayed beneath a simple arch, and sunlight poured across the lawn. It was not a grand spectacle, but it was perfect. Harold stood at the altar in a tailored suit, his hands steady for the first time in years. Beside him, Simon, 17 now, taller, stronger, leaned on polished crutches. In his hand, he carried the rings, chin lifted with pride. When Anna stepped through the archway in a modest gown, her veil catching the breeze, Harold's breath caught in his chest. There was no orchestra, no diamonds, no wealth to flaunt, only love written in every glance, every smile. The vows were spoken softly, trembling but true. When Harold slid the ring onto Anna's finger, Simon's eyes brimmed with tears. The boy who once feared abandonment now stood as witness to a family reborn. As the guests applauded, Harold pulled Anna and Simon close, his voice thick with gratitude. We've been broken, but not destroyed. Today, we begin again, not with riches, but with each other. The yard filled with cheers, the kind that came not from extravagance, but from hearts bound together. For the first time in decades, the Whitlock name was not a mark of loss, but a symbol of love and resilience. The night was quiet, laughter still echoing inside the Whitlock home when a knock shattered the calm. Harold opened the door and froze. Marjorie stood on the porch, her once glittering figure reduced to a shadow. Her coat was frayed, her eyes hollow, a suitcase sagging at her side. "Harold," she whispered, voice cracking. "It's me. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I've changed. Please let me come back. I have nowhere else." Before Harold could answer, Simon appeared in the hall. Houghton now, taller, stronger, yet the sight of her brought back a decade of scars. His voice was steady, almost too calm. "You left me," he said. "You left me when I needed you most. You called me a burden. Do you think I forgot?" Tears spilled down Marjorie's cheeks. "Simon, I was scared. I didn't know how to handle—" "No," he cut her off, jaw tight. "You didn't care." Behind him, Anna stepped quietly forward, her hand slipping into Harold's. Her presence said everything without a word. Harold's voice was firm but calm. "Marjorie, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean opening this door. It means I refuse to let hatred own me. My family is whole now. You don't belong here anymore." Marjorie sobbed, reaching out, but Harold closed the door softly, not with anger, but with finality. Inside, warmth and laughter continued. Outside, Marjorie sank to her knees on the cold porch, clutching her suitcase as the light faded behind the door she would never enter again. Two lives, once bound together, had diverged into opposite paths. Marjorie chose ambition over loyalty. She chased glitter, only to be left in silence. Her diamonds worthless, her promises ash. Her name, once spoken in halls of luxury, was now forgotten in the clatter of a diner's plates. In the end, she stood alone, haunted not by what she gained, but by what she threw away. Harold chose honor, even in ruin. He carried his son through nights of hunger, rebuilt his company with steady hands, and opened his heart to love, when fear told him to shut it. What he gained was not riches, but something rarer: dignity, family, and a legacy of trust. Their stories reveal a truth sharper than any judgment. It is not wealth or status that defines you, but the choices you make when the storm strips everything else away. One path led to loneliness, the other to love. One ended in despair, the other in renewal. Viewers, remember this: the real treasure is not in banks or penthouses, not in jewels or titles. It lies in the hands that still hold yours when everything else has crumbled. That is the fortune no thief can steal, no contract can forfeit, no time can erode. And it is the only wealth worth keeping. And now, dear viewers, the story rests in your hands. We have witnessed betrayal, downfall, resilience, and renewal. Two lives that once shared the same roof chose different roads, one paved with greed, the other with grace. But the question remains: what would you have done? If you were in Harold's place, standing at the door with Marjorie begging to return, would you have opened it? Or would you have closed it forever, choosing the family that proved true? And beyond that, who do you believe truly won in this story? The woman who chased glitter only to be left in ruin, or the man who built again from nothing, finding love and legacy along the way? We want to hear your thoughts. Your perspective may shine a new light on this tale of choices and consequences. So tell us, if it were your life, your family, your door, what choice would you make? Share your answers in the comments below. And if this story stirred something in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. That way, you won't miss the next journey, another tale of betrayal, redemption, and the truths that bind us all.